I want to talk a little bit beyond mold, because you talk about indoor air quality. You're an indoor air quality crusader. I feel like we're in this kind of spot where we've built our homes to be of terrible indoor air quality, meaning we've sealed them in, right, to make them very energy efficient, but that means nothing gets out. And then we put a bunch of just terrible ingredients, whether it's even from scented candles, Febreze, our carpet is, fire retardants, and, VOCs, as you said before. It's just basically we're sitting in a chemical stew that's in our air and we're breathing it. And then we don't even open windows anymore, which I find strange. I know new apartments that don't even have a window that you can open to get fresh air, and they just say they filter it. With all of that said, what does one need to look out for? Number one, I would say part of that question is, there certain things that you don't want to introduce into your environment, your home? And number two, how can we best filter those things that obviously we're not going to get away from everything?
Yeah, so you hit on a very important point. So mold is only one piece of the whole thing, right? If you were to look at air, it looks a lot like weather. Right, you got plumes of chemicals and particles, and they are, if you could see microscopically, you'd be amazed that we're in like more like a stew than we are in like this clear liquid that's, this clear fluid, I should say. And so, in fact, there's the statistics around this are fascinating, and I'll get into the filtration in a minute, but from 1965 until 2014, respiratory illness is up 165% in the United States, and also during that same period, roughly the same period, death related to respiratory illness is up 30%. Now, this is during a time when smoking has gone down precipitously by some measures about 80%. And so you think, well, geez, if we got rid of smoking, which is the big cause of lung cancer and respiratory illness, then why are the numbers going up so high? And, you can quickly point, if you just do a little bit of a rewind, you'll see that we closed up our buildings really tight for energy efficiency in the 70s, right, during the fuel crisis. We also started building out of essentially petrochemicals. And very cheap, quick building materials in order to meet the demands of the baby boomers, and then the buildings now, when they get wet, the water gets into the walls. It used to be we'd build out of stone, plaster, old growth timber, things like that, concrete. And when water got in the walls, it went away. So it dry out. The wind would blow and it would whistle and it would dry out. Now stuff gets in and it stays in. We build paper mache in plastic bags. It's really crazy. And the materials are, doing a lot of imports from overseas. And so in order to make those things quickly and cheaply, they're made with solvents and adhesives and things that have to dry quickly, which means if they dry, those chemicals are becoming airborne. Things don't dry and then go nowhere. It comes out and goes into the air. And so, but we lock ourselves in these boxes, and the new house smell is one of those funny things. A new car smell is very alluring. It's again a very counterintuitive thing. People think of this as like the badge, like they won, they've arrived. And when I walk into a house like that, I smell cancer. And that's the reality of it. And I used to be allured by that. I remember moving into my first apartment. It was freshly painted. I thought, oh my God, this is great. It's fresh. It's new. It's clean. And I look back at that now and I'm like, I wouldn't let my kids spend 10 minutes in there. Right. And I went and was like, cool, let's move in. And so it's just the first thing you want to do is stop. The first step to detoxing, and again, buildings and bodies, detox the body, detox the building. First step to detoxing is stop toxing. So stop bringing that stuff in the building. That means if you're going to paint, use no VOC paints. If you're going to get carpet or have any installations at all, go to greenguard.org. And it's a resource where builders can find low emission materials, low and no emission materials. And before you buy even so much as a tube of caulk, you can go there. And verify that what you're getting actually is low or no emissions. Very important. Also, no chemicals. You don't need to kill anything. You don't need to use any antimicrobials. By the way, even with COVID, the study that they did on COVID, where they used a surrogate virus and they spread it out on hard surfaces, and they used an wide spectrum antimicrobial and also hot water, and they used same exact cleaning mechanism on both sides, and they couldn't tell the difference between the outcomes. There was no difference. So you don't need to kill Stop the killing. So that's number two. And if you stop the killing and recognize that we need to cooperate with our environment, and that there's direct correlation between a high biodiversity, lots of microbes in your building. Okay. And there's a great book called Never Home Alone by Rob Dunn. Anyone who's interested in this should read Rob Dunn's fascinating and hilarious and eye-opening book. He's a riot, and you'll be shocked and surprised by what's in your house, but also you'll stop wanting to kill stuff. And so there's a direct correlation between a high biodiversity and low incidence of asthma, allergies, and autoimmune disease. And the data is very strong. And also a very low biodiversity, very high degree or high incidence of asthma, allergies, and autoimmune disease. So we need these microbes, right? And so what we don't need is all these chemicals. So the first thing you want to do is stop getting these chemicals in the house, and stop trying to kill everything. And don't use air fresheners. These are bad news. Don't use essential oils except for very occasionally as a way to, because by the way, those are VOCs too. And oftentimes they can cause problems in people that are sensitive, and they may not even know it. A lot of people rely on those. They erringly think that they're going to do something for mold, and they don't. This is a wives' tale. There are applications for that. They're outside of my area of expertise, but as a general rule, using anything to freshen air actually is not freshening the air. If you want to freshen air, open your windows. Okay. That's fresh air, presuming that your outside air is acceptable. And that's the other thing, is we don't open our windows enough. The word human comes from humus, which means earth, soil. And in fact, most of the microbes that are very friendly that are in our gut are from soil, right? And so we are from soil, and theoretically we go back to the soil. But we've disconnected ourselves such that we even bury ourselves in boxes so the soil can't get in, right? So we are so disconnected from the earth that we are now wondering why the earth is now a threat to us. Mold, the most ubiquitous biological particulates in the world, are now a threat to us because we've been so distanced from them. So I always say, use a lot of HEPA filters. Use HEPA vacuums, but not to remove the particles that are produced by biological materials. You want to use those to remove the man-made stuff. Your building is shedding paint particles and the polyurethane flooring that you're walking across. So why do you have to refinish your floor? Because those particles are coming off. They're going into the dust. You want to worry about your dust. Worry about that stuff. That's a chemical. That's a concentrated amount of chemicals that your babies and your puppies and your kittens are licking. It's called incidental ingestion, and by some measures, we take in about 100 milligrams a day of these kinds of chemicals via dust through just hand to mouth. Especially, like I said, babies and puppies and kittens and the people who we really care and love for the most. So we want to clean that stuff up, but not to get rid of all the particles, not to sterilize the air. We want to get rid of that stuff because of the chemicals more so than anything else. And also if you want to filter out VOCs, you have to use filters that have a lot of carbon in them. And most of the filters are not, the HEPA filters are for particles only. Mm-hmm. So you need activated carbon, and most filters, even with activated carbon, have very little. They have a thin layer of it. There are a few units out there. The IQ Air makes probably the best VOC filters out there. The Health Pro Plus. But and then in some cases where you have a VOC problem in the house, you sometimes need to install dilutive mechanisms. So in other words, where you'd actually have like an energy recovery ventilator or a heat recovery ventilator, which actually brings fresh air from outside and then expels stale air and transfers the heat. So using a heat exchanger, those are very effective in buildings where there's a lot of VOCs. But the bottom line is that we are now facing, I would argue, a real threat with our health. Mold is always what people call us about, but I actually really do think that the predominant cause of most chronic illness is poor air quality, and food follows a very close second. And VOCs are the primary violator in my experience. This is what the data is showing, and this is, especially as we spend more time indoors, especially as we stay in one building in particular. 20,000 doses of just one building's poison. Right. It's not just multiple buildings, right?
Well, that was the wild part of the pandemic, where lockdowns, where suddenly you were stuck inside your house for much longer than you've ever been. You weren't outside at all, and you were stuck in a house, most likely that wasn't doing you any favors because of what's going on in the air. And people don't 100%. Know this. And like you said, it's air quality, it's food. People like to, just stick on food all the time. What are you eating? How are you eating? How clean is it? This, that, everything. But don't ever discuss air quality. the thing you breathe, like you said, 20,000 times every single day, over and over. And that's where, the discussion needs to go to. And I'm really happy we're having this discussion,